On a crisp autumn morning within the private nursery quarters of Windsor Castle, a seemingly routine moment between a grandmother and her granddaughter spiraled into a chilling confrontation that would threaten the very fabric of the British monarchy. A forgotten phone, left silently recording on a sofa, captured not words of affection, but a calculated proposition, a hushed threat, and the beginning of a secret campaign that would force a future king and queen to wage a shadow war to protect their firstborn daughter. This is not a tale of palace gossip, but the reconstructed true account of the desperate gamble launched from within the royal walls, the night Princess Charlotte's parents discovered she was in serious danger. The soft afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Adelaide Cottage, painting warm rectangles on the playroom floor where Princess Charlotte, a whirlwind of energy at 7 years old, was orchestrating a complex tea party for her stuffed animals. Her mother, the Princess of Wales, watched with a fond smile, her own quiet satisfaction a shield against the relentless world outside. The peace was a hard-won prize. Earlier that day, a routine meeting had taken place at Windsor Castle, a discussion about the upcoming Christmas schedule. Present were King Charles III, Queen Camilla, and the Prince and Princess of Wales. It had been civil, if notably cool. Camilla had been particularly attentive to Charlotte in the minutes before the meeting, offering to take her to see the ponies, a suggestion the eager young girl had embraced. Kate had felt a minor twinge, not of suspicion, but of a mother's reluctance. Their time was so structured, these spontaneous moments were rare. She'd pushed the feeling aside. Unbeknownst to anyone, in the gentle chaos of leaving, Charlotte had been playing with her mother's mobile phone, which had then been tucked into the plush fabric of a nursery sofa and left behind. It was only later that evening, after a frantic search, that the device's location was pinged at Windsor. William offered to collect it the next day, but Kate, with a mother's slight nagging worry about missing messages from the school, decided to go herself. She was admitted to the Queen's private sitting room, where Camilla, surprised but courteous, handed over the phone. Charlotte must have hidden it. Camilla laughed lightly. She's such a clever, spirited girl. It reminds me so much of Charles at that age. As Kate turned to leave, Camilla's voice softened, adopting a confidential tone. Before you go, my dear, I've been meaning to speak with you. About Charlotte. Kate paused. Camilla gestured to a chair. It's about her exposure. The world she's growing up in. William had such a fractured, painful childhood with the press hounding his mother. And you see what it did to Harry. The institution can be a cold guardian. Kate nodded, her guard subtly rising. Charles and I, Camilla continued, we worry. She is so prominent, second in line to the throne for her generation. The pressure, the danger, it's a magnitude different even to what George faces as the direct heir. History has shown us how vulnerable the spare can be. She leaned forward. We have an opportunity. A quiet, secure place in the country, near Highgrove. She could have a near-normal childhood. Fewer public engagements, a shielded education. Charles agrees it might be safer. A kind of protective custody, if you will. She could stay with us for extended periods. It would be a weight off your shoulders, with Louis being so young and George's demands. Think of it as us helping to carry the burden. Kate's blood ran cold. The words were velvet-wrapped, but the core was ice. This wasn't a suggestion about schooling. It was a proposal for removal. That is a kind thought, Kate said, her voice remarkably steady. But William and I are her parents. Her security and well-being are, and always will be, our first priority. Her place is with us. A flicker passed behind Camilla's eyes, not offense, but something more calculating, like a chess player seeing a countermove. Of course, Camilla said smoothly, rising. But the crown has considerations that sometimes must supersede even parental instinct. For the good of the child and the monarchy. Do think on it. Driving back to Windsor, Kate's hands were tight on the steering wheel. The phrase protective custody echoed in her mind. That night, she recounted the conversation to William in the privacy of their bedroom. His face hardened into a mask of disbelief, then fury. Supersede parental instinct. He repeated, his voice low and dangerous. What is she playing at? It was then, Kate remembered. Her phone. When she'd found it, it had been warm, the battery unusually low. She opened it, navigated to the voice memo app. She had been experimenting with it weeks before to record Louis's funny babblings. The app was open, and there was a recording, over an hour long, that she had not initiated. With mounting dread, they listened. The audio was crystal clear. It captured the entire conversation, the clinking of china, Charlotte's distant laughter from the corridor, and Camilla's carefully articulated proposal. They heard their own voices, Kate's polite refusal, and Camilla's final, chilling statement about the crown's supremacy. The subtext was now text. This was not a grandmother's overreach. It was a formal, premeditated strategy discussed with the king. William stared at the phone as if it were a live grenade. "She's not just suggesting a holiday," he whispered. "She's building a case. The burden, the danger, the crown's considerations. This is a preamble." That night, sleep did not come. They were no longer just senior working royals. They were parents under a silent, internal siege. The first move in a game they never agreed to play had been made, and the prize was their daughter. A profound and unsettling quiet descended upon the Wales household in the days that followed. Outwardly, all was normal: school runs, official duties, smiling waves. Inwardly, William and Kate were in a state of high alert, their every interaction with the king and queen now filtered through a lens of acute suspicion. The recording existed on multiple encrypted drives, their modern-day equivalent of a locked diplomatic pouch. They consulted no one, not even their most trusted private secretaries. This was a family matter of the most toxic and dangerous kind. William requested a private audience with his father, ostensibly to discuss environmental initiatives for the Duchy of Cornwall. The meeting was held at Clarence's house. The atmosphere was strained. Charles, while never demonstratively affectionate, seemed paler, more burdened than usual. After the official business concluded, William steered the conversation. "I've been thinking about the children's long-term welfare," he began, choosing his words with the precision of a bomb disposal expert. "Specifically Charlotte. The unique spotlight on her." Charles nodded, steepling his fingers. "A constant concern. Camilla and I discuss it often. The media attention today is even more voracious than in the past." William noticed the slip. "In my day" would have been the natural phrase. "In the past" implicated Diana, a ghost at the table. "We believe the current approach, with her integrated into our family unit, under our direct protection, is the soundest," William stated, his tone leaving no room for debate. Charles shifted in his chair, a flash of discomfort crossing his face. "Of course, the parental view is paramount. But you must understand, the institution has a very long memory and a protective, sometimes possessive instinct towards all those in the direct line. There are historical precedents for reassessing living arrangements for the safeguarding of junior royals." The word precedents hung in the air. William thought of his own great-uncle, the Duke of Windsor, effectively exiled, of royal children raised by governesses and distant relatives in centuries past. "We are not living in the 18th century, William said, a sharp edge entering his voice. "Charlotte is our daughter. Her place is with her mother and me. Any suggestion to the contrary is not only unwelcome, it is unacceptable." Charles held his son's gaze for a long moment, and, in his eyes, William saw not malice, but a profound, weary conflict. He saw a man torn between the wife who now shared his bed and throne, and the son who was his legacy. Charles looked away first. "No one is making suggestions, William," he said, but the denial lacked conviction. It was a confirmation. Meanwhile, Kate began her own quiet, meticulous investigation. She reached out to a former senior palace courtier, a woman long retired who had served the queen for decades and who had no loyalty to the Camilla-led household. Over a discreet, anonymous lunch, Kate, under a veil of hypothetical questions about historical royal child-rearing, gleaned crucial information. The courtier, sharp as a tack, read between the lines. "You must watch the legalities," she murmured, stirring her tea. "The sovereign is the parens patriae, the parent of the nation. It is an ancient, largely dormant power concerning the welfare of wards of the state. In extreme circumstances, and with immense pressure, arguments could be concocted, especially if a narrative of instability or danger were cultivated." She paused, looking at Kate with pity. "The 1772 Royal Marriages Act is gone, but the mindset that created it lingers in some dusty corners. They would need allies. Look to the Lord Chancellor's office. Look to the private secretaries who see children as chess pieces in a 1,000-year game." Kate returned home, her heart a cold stone. This was bigger than a possessive step-grandmother. This was about the machinery of the monarchy itself, and Camilla was attempting to pull a lever. That weekend, during a family lunch at Sandringham, the tension was a tangible entity. Camilla was excessively sweet to Charlotte, promising her a special mare from the royal stables, talking constantly of our future rides at Highgrove. It was a charm offensive, a direct attempt to win the child's affection. Charlotte, innocent and loving, responded with enthusiasm. Kate and William exchanged a look of pure horror. The strategy was multifaceted: pressure the parents, ensnare the child. The breaking point came when William's private secretary forwarded a draft of a memo from the Queen's office regarding the long-term security and educational provisioning for minor royals in the current generation. Buried in the bureaucratic language was a clause suggesting a dedicated, separate household for a certain female child to mitigate marketable media exposure and provide tailored pastoral care. It was unsigned, labeled a discussion paper. William stormed into his study, the paper crumpling in his fist. The abstract discussion had just materialized into a document. The campaign was operational. He knew then that a private rebuke was insufficient. They needed a counterstrike so formidable it would end this forever. They would have to go to the one person whose authority could shut it all down. The only person in the family who had ever truly understood being separated from her child, and the only person whose word was still, ultimately, law. Queen Elizabeth II. The decision to involve the late Queen was not taken lightly. It was a nuclear option, an admission that the conflict had escalated beyond the reach of private resolution. William and Kate knew it risked irrevocably shattering their relationship with Charles and Camilla. But the alternative, allowing the insidious campaign to continue, to let the idea of Charlotte's removal gain any further legitimacy, was unthinkable. They requested an urgent, utterly private audience at Windsor Castle, using a code phrase known only to the Queen's most senior, trusted aide. The meeting was set for a rainy Tuesday evening, in the Queen's personal sitting room, a sanctum rarely seen by anyone. When they entered, the Queen, though frilier, was seated with her customary upright posture, her eyes alert and piercing. She dismissed her lady-in-waiting with a nod. "This is most unusual," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "I assume it is a matter of grave importance." William, without preamble, placed a small audio player on the table between them. "Grandmother," he said, the informal address heavy with emotion. "We need you to listen to something. It concerns the safety and future of your great-granddaughter." He pressed play. In the silent, historic room, Camilla's voice, smooth and persuasive, filled the space. They watched the Queen's face. As the recording progressed, her expression, initially one of polite attention, hardened into granite. Her knuckles, resting on the arm of her chair, turned white. She did not interrupt. She listened to the full, damning hour, including her son Charles's implied complicity in the earlier conversation William had relayed. When it finished, a deep, frosty silence descended. The Queen looked from William to Kate, her gaze settling on Kate's pale, determined face. "This was recorded in my home," she stated, not a question. "Yes, ma'am," Kate replied. "By accident. But by providence." The Queen closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, they held a storm of disappointment and fury. "I have spent my entire life trying to protect this family from itself," she said, her voice trembling with a rare, unveiled emotion. "From its own worst instincts. To think that this plot is being hatched under this roof, against a child of 7. She turned to William. "Your father?" He did not reject the idea, ma'am. He spoke of institutional precedents. A deep sigh escaped the Queen. She looked every one of her years. "Weakness," she whispered, more to herself than to them. "A desperate desire for a quiet life, at any cost." She straightened up, the monarch reasserting herself over the great-grandmother. "You were right to bring this to me. This ends tonight. But, you must understand, to kill a serpent, you must crush its head completely, or it will regrow. A private scolding will not suffice. She will wait. She will adapt. What do you advise?" William asked, his heart pounding. "You have the evidence," the Queen said, her voice now steely and strategic. "You must force a constitutional and personal reckoning so stark that the very thought becomes toxic. You will confront them. Together. Here. But not alone." She reached for a bell pull. "We shall have witnesses. The one thing the Crown fears more than scandal is exposure within the firm. I will summon the one person whose loyalty to the direct line of succession is absolute, and whose legal mind is without peer." 30 minutes later, the door opened to admit the Princess Royal, Princess Anne. She entered, took in the somber scene, her mother's grave face, William and Kate's tension, and simply raised an eyebrow. "Trouble?" she asked, her tone characteristically blunt. The Queen gestured for her to sit. The gravest kind, and you are here as a witness and an ally. William, play the recording for your aunt. And listened, her expression growing grimmer by the minute. At the end, she snorted, a sound of pure contempt. Idiotic, she declared. Vicious and idiotic. Playing with children as if they are crown property. So, Camilla fancies herself a royal governess? She overreaches. Anne's loyalty was not to individuals, but to the monarchy's stability and to her late brother's line. This threat to William's child was an attack on that stability. What's the plan? She asked, ready for battle. The Queen outlined it. They would summon Charles and Camilla, ostensibly for a routine family discussion. And the Queen would be present as silent witnesses initially. William and Kate would confront them with the evidence. The presence of the Queen and the Princess Royal would prevent any attempt at denial or minimization. It would be a tribunal. We do this now, the Queen said. It was nearly midnight. Tonight, before anyone can prepare a defense, messages were sent. Charles and Camilla, confused and undoubtedly uneasy at the late hour and the unusual summons, arrived 20 minutes later. They were visibly startled to see and present. The atmosphere was glacial. The Queen did not offer them seats. This meeting, the Queen began, her voice cutting the air, concerns an attempt to undermine the parental authority of the Prince and Princess of Wales and to remove their daughter, Princess Charlotte, from their care. We have heard a recording of this proposal being made. We will now all hear it again. Before Camilla could muster a protest, William pressed play. In that room, surrounded by the most powerful members of the family she had fought so hard to join, Camilla was forced to listen to her own words. Her face drained of all color. Charles looked as if he might be sick, his eyes darting between his mother's furious stare and his wife's crumbling composure. As the final phrase, supersede parental instinct, echoed away, the silence was absolute and devastating. William stood. Explain, he said, the single word of command. Camilla, flustered, tried to revert to the grandmotherly concern. It was only a suggestion for her well-being. You're twisting my meaning. Kate spoke then, her voice quiet, but diamond-hard. You spoke of protective custody. You referenced the crowns will over ours. That is not a suggestion for a holiday. That is a blueprint for taking our child. Charles found his voice, a weak, pleading thing. This is a misunderstanding. No one intends to take Charlotte. And cut him off, her voice like a whip. Don't be obtuse, Charles. The memo from her office on separate households? The constant conditioning of the child with promises of Highgrove? This was a coordinated strategy. And you, she turned her laser gaze on Camilla. You, of all people, should know the damage caused by divided loyalties and manipulation within this family. To attempt to engineer it yourself is grotesque. The Queen finally rose. She was small in stature, but, in that moment, she seemed to tower over them all. There will be no further discussion on this matter, she decreed, her tone brooking no argument. Princess Charlotte's place is with her parents. Any document, any memo, any whisper suggesting otherwise is hereby nullified. Permanently. I am directing the Lord Chancellor's office that any future submissions regarding the guardianship of my great-grandchildren must receive my personal sign-off, and mine alone, regardless of the reigning monarch. This power I will hold until my last breath. She looked directly at Camilla, her gaze unforgiving. You have damaged the trust of this family in a profound way. Your role is to support the crown, not to fracture its foundation. You will cease all private communications regarding the Wales children's upbringing. You will retreat from this ambition entirely. Is that understood? Camilla, utterly defeated, could only nod, tears of humiliation in her eyes. Charles stared at the floor, the full weight of his acquiescence crushing him. The Queen then turned to William and Kate. This record is sealed. It goes no further. But it is our shield. The affair is over. The meeting ended not with a bang, but with a suffocating silence of defeat and victory. As Charles and a shaken Camilla left, the Queen placed a frail hand on William's arm. You must rule your own family, she said softly. No one else. Never forget that. The battle was won, but the war for the soul of the modern monarchy had just laid bare its deepest, most poisonous fault line. The victory in the Queen's sitting room was absolute, but its aftermath was a landscape of cold ruin within the family. An official silence, heavier than any announcement, descended. Public engagements were meticulously coordinated to avoid direct interaction between the Wales and Cornwall households. The Christmas walk to church at Sandringham that year was a masterclass in strained civility, analyzed frame by the world's press. who sensed a chill but could not identify its source. For Charles, the confrontation was a catastrophic personal failure. The Queen's scorn, his sister's contempt, and, most painfully, his son's shattered trust, left him isolated in his own palace. He attempted a clumsy, private reconciliation with William, a letter filled with regrets about miscommunications and well-intentioned overstep. William's reply was brief and formal, thanking him for his note and reiterating that the matter was closed. But the door to easy intimacy remained firmly shut. Charles was forced to confront the terrible cost of his desire for domestic peace with Camilla. It had come at the price of his relationship with his heir and his grandchildren. Camilla, publicly, retreated into a shell of dutiful correctness. The charming, gregarious persona was replaced by a more subdued, careful one. Her staff underwent a quiet but thorough reshuffle, with several key aides associated with the educational provision memo finding posts elsewhere. The charm offensive towards Charlotte ceased abruptly, replaced by a distant, correct affection that confused the young princess. "Why doesn't Granny Camilla take me to see the ponies anymore?" she asked Kate one day. Kate's heart ached as she fashioned a gentle reply about everyone being very busy. The innocent casualty in a war of adults. But the threat, though blunted, had revealed a vulnerability. William and Kate knew that the Queen's protection, while formidable, was not eternal. They needed to fortify their daughter's position in a way that was unassailable, not just by family decree, but by modern law and public expectation. They began a dual strategy. Privately, they engaged a top family law KC, not to initiate proceedings, but to understand the exact limits of the sovereign's parents' patrie power and to draft ironclad, private legal instruments, wills, guardianship directives, that explicitly stated their wishes and named trusted individuals, like the Princess Royal and the Middleton family, as protectors, creating a legal firewall around their children. Publicly, they embarked on a subtle but powerful campaign of their own. They consciously began to integrate Charlotte more visibly into their family unit brand. Official photographs released for Charlotte's birthday showed not just the princess, but Kate and William alongside her, a picture of modern, hands-on parenting. On engagements, where appropriate, they spoke more openly about the challenges and joys of raising a daughter in the public eye, always emphasizing their role as a close-knit team. They showcased her personality, her bossiness, her humor, her bond with her brothers, making her not a distant royal pawn, but a beloved, real child in the public's heart. The narrative they built was impregnable. Charlotte was the cherished daughter of the future king and queen, inseparable from their family core. The final, definitive act came months later, during the planning for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. A major televised event involving multiple generations of royals was being organized. The initial seating plan, drawn up by the king's household, placed Charlotte somewhat separately from her parents, closer to Charles and Camilla's grouping. William's private secretary sent back a terse, unprecedented correction. The Prince and Princess of Wales and their 3 children will be seated together as a single unit. This is non-negotiable. The message was clear. Any attempt to visually or physically separate their children would be met with immediate, uncompromising resistance. The king's household, chastened, acquiesced without argument. The Jubilee itself became a symbolic full stop. On the balcony of Buckingham Palace, as the flypast roared overhead, the world saw the image. The elderly queen, a bastion of tradition. Beside her, the future, William, Kate, George, Charlotte, and Louis, a solid, unbreakable block. Charles and Camilla stood on the other side of the Queen, the physical space between them a silent testament to the rift. In that iconic photograph, the past and the future were framed, but the unity of the direct, nuclear family line was the undeniable focus. The public celebrated the happy family. The inner court read the strategic message. The line in the sand had been drawn in stone. Time, the great healer, proved to be more of a careful bureaucrat in this case. It filed the incident away, not in the folder marked forgiven, but in the one labeled settled, with permanent conditions. The family carried on, the machinery of monarchy grinding forward, but the internal gears had been permanently reset. The passing of Queen Elizabeth II and the accession of King Charles III was a period of profound national mourning and transition. For William and Kate, now the Prince and Princess of Wales, it was a period of heightened vigilance. With Charles as king, The theoretical powers of the crown were now his. But the confrontation had changed the balance of power irrevocably. Charles knew, with crystalline clarity, that any resurrection of the old idea would result in a cataclysm. William, as heir, now commanded his own substantial household, his own sources of income, and, most importantly, overwhelming public support. He was not a dependent minor prince. He was a fortress in his own right. Camilla, as queen consort, found her role carefully and permanently circumscribed. The unspoken agreement, enforced by the lingering shadow of the recording and the memory of the queen's wrath, was that her domain was Charles, the charities, and the ceremonial. The Wales children, their upbringing, their education, their futures, were entirely off-limits. Her interactions with them were warm and public, but always at the invitation of their parents, and never, ever exclusive. The promise of a pony at Highgrove was never mentioned again. The true legacy of the crisis was seen in the parenting style of William and Kate. Their determination to provide a normal childhood was now alloyed with a steely, protective pragmatism. Security protocols, always tight, were reviewed with an even more paranoid eye. The circle of trust around the children shrank to its smallest, most essential core. They invested heavily in creating private, secure havens at Anmer Hall, at their new Windsor home, where the children could be truly free, far from even the internal gaze of the institution. For Princess Charlotte, growing up blissfully unaware of the storm that had once swirled around her, the outcome was a childhood of remarkable stability. She thrived as the spirited middle child, her strong personality encouraged and channeled by parents who were fiercely determined that she define her own role. The public adored her confidence. The media, sensing the absolute unity of her parents' front, treated her with a respect that bordered on caution. She was not an asset to be managed, but a young girl to be protected. Years later, when a biography of King Charles III was published, it contained a veiled, ambiguous paragraph about early tensions regarding the upbringing of the second generation and well-meaning but misplaced interventions. It caused a minor flutter of speculation. In a joint television interview shortly thereafter, William was asked about the challenges of raising royal children. He looked straight into the camera, his arm around Kate. "The most important thing Kate and I ever decided," he said, his voice calm but firm, "was that our family comes first, last, and always. We are the parents. We make the decisions. And we are a team. That is the only way it can work." Kate nodded, her smile warm but her eyes resolute. No names were mentioned. No specifics were given. But the message was received, from a future king to the nation, and to the history books. The line of succession was secure, not just in blood, but in the unbreakable bond of a modern family who had stared down an ancient instinct and won. The danger had passed, leaving behind a quieter, stronger, and forever altered monarchy.